Hey everyone! Today we're going to be looking at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Aquaman. So this is a bit of an old figure. I'm going to get out of the way and just admit it. A bit of an old figure. I'm definitely super late on this one. But a figure that honestly I've been pushing off getting for a long time. In my collection, I have I believe it's called the DC, I think it's the DC Direct New 52 Aquaman that came in like the set with the entire Justice League. That has been my go-to Aquaman, honestly, because I only needed the one to complete my Justice League. But I've always been looking, as soon as McFarlane Toys came out, I've been looking to upgrade my Justice League figures, and slowly I've been able to, and I finally have just kind of caved and thought, I've got to give Aquaman the DC Multiverse upgrade and get a more articulated figure up here. So ipso facto, that's where we are at, where we're at. So taking a look up at the figure in the packaging here, standard DC Multiverse packaging. We got DC Multiverse Aquaman on the right, Aquaman, Justice League, and Endless Winter. Then we got a little bit of ding on the packaging here, but I bought this aftermarket. I bought this on, I think I got this on off of Whatnot. Yeah, so totally fine. I'm going to open this. I'm not even worried about this, but a little bit of ding in there. And then on the side, DC Multiverse Aquaman, and on the back, a cool image of the figure. And this is again from the Endless Winter wave. I don't think this comes with a Build-A-Figure piece, which is fine. Honestly, I'm not looking to collect that wave or that Build-A-Figure, so no big deal. I'm totally fine without that big Build-A-Figure piece. But anyway, let's go ahead and crack this figure open and see if this is the definitive Aquaman in the DC Multiverse line. All right, now we have Aquaman out of the box. I have to say, the more that I am posing this figure around, the more fun that I'm having with them, and the more I'm liking them. It has still what I think are two major issues that I'll get into, but overall, the more that I pose this guy, the more that I do photography with him, I'm having a really good time with him, and I'm starting to like him more and more. I'm starting to think this might be the definitive Aquaman figure to have in your collection. But let's go ahead and get into it here. So to start, accessories, you're seeing the accessories. He comes with really just his trident, the DC Universe, or not DC Universe, DC Multiverse stand down here, and then his trading card, which I have right here. Nice image of Aquaman. I always prefer when they use a comic image, but I mean, I guess it's fine that they're using a product image of the figure, even though I don't know, something about this product image just isn't, I'm not liking. But turn it around, has a cool little readout of the character. Pause now if you want to read that. Mine has some damage to it, but again, I bought this secondhand. I didn't buy this directly from McFarlane or from like a store, so I'm not too worried about it. I always prefer these to be nice and minty because I do collect these cards, but it is what it is. And then just to get into this trident here, it is a really well sculpted accessory in this nice gold plastic. So looking really good. So yeah, let's go ahead and put this back on Aquaman, and let's go ahead and break down why I think this Aquaman here is actually a pretty cool figure the more you get into him. All right, getting into the sculpt and paint. To start, the sculpt here is, really, really nice. I really enjoy how they did the scaling here. It looks really good. Sometimes in the back, it does kind of tend to look more like that rocky texture that the Thing has going on than scales. But in the front, the way they kind of drape over it, it does have more of that scale look. I just think sometimes the sculpt of these scales is like a little, I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but it looks, in some angles, it looks more rocky than it does like, traditional scales. But regardless, I think the sculpt is pretty good here. And one thing that I like that they did was here in the gap right here, they smoothed it out so that it's easier to articulate. Otherwise, if that had that sculpt there, it probably would cause a lot of rubbing and a lot of issues. So I'm glad that they had this foresight to do that. But as you can see, again, the sculpt is great. The sculpt on the face is really good. I don't really like it when figures are looking in one, to left or right. I'd rather have them like looking dead on. But this looks really tight. I don't know about something about this pose like this in this angle with the shadowing and everything going on with the lighting. I think this looks really sick. Really, really sick, actually. I think it looks really cool. But one thing I have an issue with is specifically with the paint on the head sculpt is that it is super pale. Like he is, in my opinion, just incredibly pale. Like, I think he's just too pasty, and they needed to give him a bit of a tan here. He looks just way too pale, especially for a guy who's, you know, the king of the ocean. I feel like he would be a little tanner, right? Yeah, way too pale. So that's one big issue I have is that. But otherwise, again, the sculpt on here and the paint applications where they're done, besides the fact that he looks pale, otherwise he looks, you know, really, really good. I like the pearlescent orange paint used on his scaly armor, and then I also like the matted green going on here on the bottom half of his suit. The gold here does a really good job. It's not exactly the same as the Trident. If you see them right next to each other, the shade is slightly different. This is more of a yellowy gold, but I do like, you know, I think it blends well enough that, you know, you can't really notice it, you know, unless you're really looking for it. I think it looks really good. Sculpt wise, just, you know, throughout his whole, you know, the whole figure, it's really nice. This isn't really an issue as much with the sculpt here, but it is more with how the articulation works. And, you know, might as well just get into the articulation here. It is pretty standard McFarlane articulation, you know, but it has this, it's weird. It's weird. So let's get into it. Let me go ahead and move the Trident here and get this out of his hand. And let's go ahead and show you what I mean. So we have, first of all, you know, let's go through the regular stuff. He has arms that go 360. He has this kind of butterfly joint going on here that works really well. Whenever you get, you know, the scales to get under here, it does start rubbing. So just keep in mind of that. It's probably going to get, you know, with the paint and scrape it off a little bit. So just keep that in mind. He has double jointed elbows, which is really, really well done. He has he has ball hinge, I guess, wrists, which are capable of horizontal and vertical movement, which is fantastic. We have, you know, his split pose, which is good. He can kick up pretty far. He can kick back pretty far. Double jointed knees, very nice. Up and down on the ankles with ankle pivot, which is always welcome. And then he has toe articulation. And then as far as his head is concerned, he can go back not much because of his hair. That's a problem. And then he can look down a good bit. So where it gets weird, his ab articulation. So for this guy, I don't know about everyone else, but for me, like the gap that's going on here, it's like the biggest gap with the diaper thing on the DC Multiverse figures that I've seen in any one of these figures. Like, I don't know what it is about this one, but I mean, look at that. Like, that's crazy. That gap is like, is it something with the diaper? Is it riding too low? Like, what's going on? But like, when I bend back as far as I can bend, you know, it's visible. So that's not great. But when I bend forward, I mean, man, look how much, that's crazy. So, you know, there's that. That's a big issue that I have with this figure. I don't like the fact that there's that huge gap in the diaper. It feels kind of like an import figure, to be honest with, you know, I feel like I could just pop it off, and I'm sure I could, but it just, you know, it has that import kind of feel to it when you do this, when you're utilizing this kind of articulation here, and that's gonna rub people the wrong way. See, if I went and bought an import, I would expect that, right? And that wouldn't disappoint me. But the fact that I'm buying my DC Multiverse figures and it has this kind of, I mean, some people might like this. Some people might be like, oh, great, I can just really, really push the articulation on this, which is cool. But for me, I don't want that. I don't want that gap. So, but yeah, that's my big issue with this figure so far. Moving right along into the size comparisons. Before we start, don't tell me this doesn't look like Triple H, right? Is it just me, or does this Aquaman kind of look like Triple H? I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But anyway, into the size comparison. To start, let's compare him with the only other Aquaman figure that I own, which is the DC Direct New 52 Aquaman that came in the Justice League set. So to compare him, have them standing next to each other. Aquaman here is standing on a DC stand. Let me go ahead and get him off so that we can get a better comparison. So standing next to each other, our DC Multiverse Aquaman is standing a little bit taller than the DC Direct, which is expected. The DC Multiverse figures, for the most part, have always been bigger than the old DC Direct figures that were coming out. So these look, cool next to each other. I'm definitely going to be updating my display and making this my main Aquaman and putting this guy somewhere else. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this guy. And then just to keep it Aquaman, knock the camera a little bit. Just to keep it Aquaman here, let's go ahead and also compare with the DC Multiverse. Man, I cannot remember her name. I know what her story is. I know she's an alternate female Bruce Wayne that gets the trident. Oh, man. Or maybe I don't remember that much. I cannot remember her name. I think it's the Drowned. Maybe it's the Drowned. I don't know. I can't remember. But anyway, she is standing here next to Aquaman. These two look really cool next to each other. And Aquaman is standing a little bit taller than her. So there is that. These all look cool next to each other. So go ahead, move these out of the way. And since we did just segue into a Batman, I will pull another Batman out. Let's go ahead and compare next to the Zur-En-Arrh Batman here, which is one of my favorite Batman. And again, I'll go ahead and the rest of these figures for the most part are going to be DC Multiverse. So actually, you know what? I'll just take this off. Never mind. I'm not going to just keep the bases on. Anyway, so we have him next to Batman, and Batman is a good bit taller here than Aquaman. I will say that a lot of the McFarlane Batman figures just really fluctuate in size drastically. So I don't know that I think Batman should be this much bigger than Aquaman. I think this is definitely oversizing it on the Batman maybe a little bit. I didn't realize how big this Batman was until I put him next to this Aquaman. And I can't tell if the Aquaman is a small one or if the Batman is the larger one. I think it's Batman that's larger because, again, these Batman figures have had a lot of different variances in size. So now that we're just, again, keeping it Batman right now, also the Nightfall Batman here. Stay tuned, by the way. I will be reviewing this figure very, very soon. But yeah, this Batman is in a much better size, right? This is more what I would expect between Arthur and Bruce as far as height. Definitely what I would expect here. And it looks like they are just about the same size. And can I just say, these two look really sick next to each other, especially because this isn't, I know this isn't, truly the 90s look. The 90s look had the hook hand, and then for a little while, I think it was in the late 90s, early 2000s where he got the water hand. But man, with the long hair and the beard, this really just gives me the 90s vibes. And so seeing these two figures next to each other is really, really cool. This Batman will more than likely be, the Nightfall Batman will more than likely be my definitive Batman on my shelf. And next to this definitive Aquaman on my shelf, I think these guys are going to look really, really cool together. And then finally, get the Batman out of here. Our last comparison, not in the 7-inch scale, not a DC Multiverse figure, but still valid. Let's go ahead and compare him to the Marvel Legends Namor, or Namor, however you prefer to pronounce that. And as you can see, the Marvel Legends are in the 6-inch scale. McFarlane figures 7-inch scale, so naturally our Aquaman is going to be quite a bit larger than Namor. But to be honest, this is kind of like, I think this kind of works. I don't know, like, maybe it's because of this specific version of Namor, and I know the actor is kind of short. I don't know. Something about this kind of works. I feel like if you wanted to, you could get like a custom Jason Momoa head sculpt, throw it on this figure here, and have a really cool you know, comparison here. You know, you could have them next to each other. And I think you could do photography with them and make it work. And there also is, you know, the recently revealed DC Multiverse Aquaman the Lost Kingdom figures that are coming out, and I'm pretty sure they revealed a gold and green Aquaman coming from that. So you could absolutely, assuming that Aquaman is hopefully in the same scale as this Aquaman here, you could definitely do some photography, I think, between the two figures, because again, I think this works as far as the height difference between these two characters. All right, a little Brave and the Bold action here for you. So overall, again, I think this is a pretty good pickup. I think this is probably the definitive DC Multiverse Aquaman, at least until the Jason Momoa DC Multiverse one comes out for the Aquaman Lost Kingdom movie. But then again, that's going to be a very, you know, movie specific figure, so it's going to really depend on, you know, which version of Aquaman is your favorite. But if your favorite is the comic, then this is probably going to be the definitive version of Aquaman for you. You know, it does have the issues with the articulation in the ab and like the diaper area of the DC Multiverse figure, in that crotch area, just because when you do bend it forward and back, it does have that really big gappage. However, it does also have a lot of articulation and a range of movement there, so it is a give and take. So it really depends on the preference. If you're okay with the gaps, then you're probably going to like it for the articulation. If you're not okay with the gaps like me, then you're probably just not going to be, you know, again, not hyped about that part of it. But overall, I think it is worthwhile pickup. So if you do see this DC Multiverse Aquaman out there in the wild, do pick it up. If you do see it out there in the wild, it's probably going to be on clearance, just because how old this figure is. So if you see it out in a Walmart or a Target or what have you, pick it up for sure, because it is a worthwhile pickup, especially if you're an Aquaman fan. So that'll wrap it up for me, guys. I've had a great time with you always. As always, please remember to like, favorite, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you're notified anytime I upload a video. And I love you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.